It's wonderful to be back again. I believe this is the fourth weekend retreat hosted by Leon with the help of Anne in Montreal, kind of a North American, Canada, US, and Mexico gathering, more or less monthly. We are doing similar things in the UK and Europe, Australia, and so on. It's very hot here in Kyoto today. Again, it will go to 38 degrees Celsius. The body temperature is about 36. So in other words, it's about 2 degrees hotter outside than it is inside the body. Today, I would like to touch on a very fundamental Zen teaching that can be very helpful in our daily practice in seeing that we are going in the right way and also going all the way through. It is from the Sixth Patriarch of Chinese Zen, so well respected that the platform, the ordination platform, the platform sutra of the Sixth Patriarch is actually called a sutra, not a Zen record. It is a sutra. It is also largely legendary. It is not straight history, but the legendary, or we might say symbolic teachings are very valuable if we take them to heart. We don't need to take them as historical fact, but rather as a spiritual fact that we confirm in our bones. As many of you know, again, the legend, the story of the Sixth Patriarch is that he lived in southern China. He was not educated. He could not read or write. His father died when he was young, so he supported his mother by selling firewood in the nearby town. One day, he happened to hear a monk, a Chinese monk, reciting the Diamond Sutra. And as the story goes, when the monk got to the place where it says, mind arises without abiding, mind arises without abiding, without getting stuck or attached anywhere. Mind arises without abiding. This young illiterate man who was going to become the Sixth Patriarch, he had an insight, he had a glimpse, it struck him. He asked the monk, where did he get this sutra from? And was told about the Fifth Patriarch. So this young illiterate man traveled a great distance. He had never really been out of his own little village area and went to meet this Fifth Patriarch of Chinese Zen. The meeting there is quite interesting. You may read about it if you like. But the point here is simply that one line from the Diamond Sutra. It's all right there. Again, mind arises. We are not talking about becoming unconscious, dead, lifeless zombies. We have a body, we have a mind, we are in the world. So the mind arises. That is not the problem. Mind arises without abiding, again, meaning without getting stuck, attached, entangled in anything. So these two parts put together say all that we need to know, all that we need to practice. We are not simply cutting off, suppressing the mind and its experience. Mind arises. To deny that fact is itself an example of mind arising. But the point is, the mind arises without getting stuck on anything, anywhere, at any time. What does that really mean? This is what you must confirm in your own bones. If you simply let mind arise and dwell here and then dwell there, dream about this, hope about that, well, you've been there and done that 1,000, 10,000 times. But the point is not to crush our mind, rather, it is for mind to arise, yes, freely, without getting stuck anywhere. Mind arises without abiding. There is one other statement I would like to take up also from the Sixth Patriarch. You can see how, again, it is a legend, but it's a good one. This initial glimpse, he wasn't awakened with that statement. It's often misunderstood, and commentators often say that he was awakened upon hearing this statement from the Diamond Sutra, at least according to the Zen legend. No, that's wrong. He had an insight, a glimpse. He saw something. Later on, he fully realized and actually became the Sixth Patriarch, although he was illiterate, according to the legend. It's a fascinating story, a legend. You can read about it in several places. But the basic point I want to bring up here is the very famous two poems. When the Fifth Patriarch was getting old, this was only about 6 months or a year after the man who will become the Sixth Patriarch, this illiterate guy, arrives at the monastery and doesn't even get ordained. He doesn't even become a monk. He's put to work in the kitchen, threshing, grinding, preparing the rice. He's not a monk. He's a laborer. But because of the insight that he had, when the Fifth Patriarch says, I would like anyone who feels qualified to write a poem and express their realization. And if it is accepted, you will become my successor, the Sixth Patriarch. Well, again, according to the legend, no one is willing to write a poem, to do such a thing, except the head monk, the senior monk, who is very experienced, very educated. And he writes a very fine poem, which all of you know, about keeping the mirror clean, wiping the mirror, continually practicing, not letting any dust on this mirror of the mind. It's often mistakenly thought that, oh, this is a dualistic understanding and it's wrong, it's not Zen. No. Perhaps there is some dualism remaining there, but it's a very important type of practice. And as you probably know, the Sixth Patriarch, the guy who becomes the Sixth Patriarch, I should say, this illiterate guy, in his response, he says, very famous in Japanese, Honnai Muichimotsu. Originally, there's not one thing. Where can the dust alight? And this, of course, completely undercuts this whole idea of continually practicing and polishing the mirror. Wait a minute. if there's not one single thing, a mirror or a stand, a mind or a body, before or after, illusion or enlightenment, who is polishing what? So, of course, in a way, this second statement, originally not a single thing, is D.T. Suzuki called it a bomb thrown into the camp of the head monk. Well, yes, but it's also a positive response. He's not simply criticizing it, but he's showing where it must end up. Okay, so don't take it too superficially. He's not merely criticizing that practice, but showing where it must come from and go to. Again, this second statement, originally there is not a thing. You see how this naturally comes out as a kind of culmination of his first insight. The quote from the Diamond Sutra, mind arises without abiding anywhere. Originally, it's usually translated originally in Japanese, honrai. Maybe in English, it would be better to say really, really. We're not talking about originally, way back when. I don't know when, but people got enlightened back then, I guess. Back then, there's not a single thing. No. The originally, honrai, the real meaning is from the first. Here and now, what is real is there is not a single thing. Within, without, before, after, above, or below. How do you see that? How do you realize that? If you don't really grab that by the horns, you know what happens. You are simply forever going around and around, abiding here, abiding there, not fully satisfied, but you don't know what else to do. It's very exact and succinct. Honrai mu ichimoto, 5 Chinese characters. From the first, not one thing. Or again, really, in reality, right here and now, there is not one single thing. What the heck does that really mean? I hear cars and trucks in the street now. There's something called COVID-19, isn't there? There's life and death, isn't there? There's pain and pleasure, isn't there? There are Zoom meetings, I suppose, aren't there? What is it really for there to be not one single thing? This is what is confirmed in our zazen, in our bones, and then it is lived. How to say it? Not one single thing freely works in the world of distinction. Yes, doing what needs to be done, working, playing, enjoying, without getting entangled, without abiding, getting stuck in anything. Freely working, freely responding. What does it really mean? Not one thing. To make it clear. In other words, this reality is inconceivable. Oh, we can conceive it, but that's just a shadow, just a reflection. This is literally inconceivable. We cannot turn it into a concept, or to put it another way, if we do, that is just a shadow, isn't it? Just a reflection. Thus, we are left not fully satisfied. There is a sense of dissatisfaction. It's not because of the object, it's because we have turned it and ourselves into an object. But it cannot be objectified. It cannot be conceived. Not because it is some abstract, ethereal, mystical, but because it is this. And when you mentally masturbate about it, well, it's not really gone. It doesn't really disappear, but it just becomes what you know very well, a pale reflection. Well, it's there, but it's not. Yes, and you will never come fully to rest that way. The practice must be thoroughgoing. It is unmistakable in both of these expressions. Mind arises, yes, without abiding anywhere. Really, there is not one single thing. There is not a seer and there is not a seen. There is not someone in here looking and there is not something here that I see. This is true seeing. The universe smiling at itself in each and everything that is not merely a thing. It is inconceivable in a most marvelous way. Again, this is not abstract. Our ordinary experience is the abstraction, isn't it? That's why we cannot be fully satisfied with it. But this living, breathing, not one thing. Who could ask for anything more? And again, mind arises without abiding. It freely works in the world, which is also not one single thing, without entanglement. This, in a sense, is the end of one kind of practice and the beginning of another kind of practice, where we continue on for the rest of our life, nourishing this compassion, this love, the work of love in the world. Not helping others who are in need simply, but helping others who are no other than yourself, who are not one single thing, who are beyond conception. This is what we truly are, not one thing. We could just as well say, thus we are seamlessly everything. We are not apart from anything. This is, if we speak of aiming, this is what Buddhism and Zen not only aims at, but this is where it comes from. This is where true compassion comes from. Because the separation is gone. It doesn't mean everything becomes one big mush. No, on the contrary, the true dignity of each and everything in not being anything is now shining forth in all its majesty. The insecurity of the self-delusion it no longer needs to grasp it as something, to know it as an object, to identify it, to compare it with this or that. the insecurity that spawns and continues this suffering is null and void. It is gone without a trace. Without this, the practice does not have a real foundation. Is this not also the source of creativity? Being truly, freely creative, not rearranging our mental delusions in a new way. That's not creativity at all. Creativity is not being one thing. And that not one thing gives rise, creates all, everything. This is creativity, whether in music or in art or in our life. Not simply to replay the old mental patterns. They're not needed. We don't need to come back to those old mental patterns. Yes, it's a kind of default. That's the necessity of the head monk's poem. Yes, if you think you can get away with this without polishing your mirror for a while, you are sorely deluded. You are dreaming. At the same time, if you think you can get there by polishing the mirror, you are deluded. Right there is where we must give all of ourselves. Right there. Not turning the practice, not turning ourselves, not turning the other into anything, so that they can truly be what they are. In the earlier talks, I addressed this issue of the practice being constant and complete, especially this notion of the practice being constant, not just something we do for a while on our cushion and then get up and do something else. If you're doing that, you might as well play golf. It's got to become constant the way we are. This is very much in line with what the head monk is saying in his poem. It is not to be denied. But we don't get there through that practice. Rather, we simply give ourselves, and this constancy. We cannot step out of the real practice. Once we give all of ourselves, how can you step out of it? You can't. So for the practice to be constant and then naturally to come to be complete, to include everything, to let mind arise without getting stuck anywhere. Thus, to realize in your bones, really, there is not one single thing. There is not one thing to practice. There's not one thing to realize. There's not even one thing to let go. I've been speaking for about 20-25 minutes. I'd like to leave plenty of room for questions from out of the practice. And once you are really settled in this and it is clear, feel free to contact me. And at least for now, we have no choice but to practice online. But we can do what we can do with online encounters as needed. I'm here for you. Thank you all for listening so intently.
I have a question.
Please.
Jeff, can you make more explicitly the connection between the constant practice and not resting on anything?
Mm-hmm. In terms of our daily practice as a process, bringing ourselves to the cushion over and over, seeing ourselves stuck somewhere in our daily life. Here, it's so valuable to recognize how the practice really is constant. Of course, there are ups and downs. There are cold days, there are hot days. There are days we have headaches. There are days that before you get out of bed already, there are problems. Other days when the blue sky goes on forever. All of this is, yes, it's not to be denied. But as we give ourselves, and John, we have practiced together, you know this. As we give ourselves to the practice, at least for some time, it becomes clear. It's not a matter of trying to put all of the pieces together like a balancing act, oops, no, I lost it again. As a process, we need to bring our mind back again and again and again, simply because our mind has learned how to wander, how to escape, how to find something outside. So yes, this discipline, what the head monk spoke of, constantly polishing the mirror so that no dust collects. This is a valuable, virtually essential practice. Without that, usually people cannot begin. It's a good question you asked, John, because when you read the story of the Sixth Patriarch, the guy who becomes the Sixth Patriarch, Huineng or Eno, one of the things the sutra is clearly trying to show is that finally, it is not a matter of forever practicing and polishing the mirror. He didn't even know about all of these teachings. He couldn't even read or write. And the first insight he had was when he was how Chinese. He was working. He was selling firewood. He wasn't sitting on his butt. And yet he had an intuition, an immediate insight. This is what has become very, very important in Zen. Again, not denying the necessity of this gradual practice, which comes to be constant, the way that we are, not something that we go into or out of. Please, it's easy to misunderstand that this is, we can throw that out. All we need is the immediate insight. Well, they go hand in hand, John. There's no contradiction at all. But when the practice really becomes constant, then when that illumination, when that awakening, when that breakthrough occurs, it is full and final. It is not a flashlight shining on something suddenly, but it's the sun rising and everything is illumined. There cannot be a shadow of a doubt. Without that, you see, Jean, without that, yes, you can have a glimpse or an insight. People often do. People who never heard of Zen people who have never meditated. Seeing a sunset or a sunrise, or it could be anything. Seeing a leaf fall from a tree can show themselves in the world in a completely new light. Do you know what I'm talking about, John? These kinds of glimpses and insights.
Yes, yes.
They happen. In a sense, they really are not the result of anything. You might say it's precisely that moment where there is no result that it happens, you see? That it can pop up because we're not turning the world or ourselves into an object at that moment. So we do have a glimpse of what I'm talking about. If you told that person right then, really, there's not a single thing, they might really understand it. It might be the most obvious thing in the world. But without training the mind, that kind of glimpse or insight may not only it may not be helpful, it may actually become a hindrance, you see, because they don't have a place to put it. It can drive them crazy. We all know people who have had experiences like that. Perhaps they decide to leave their family or quit their job all of a sudden. Often it can be a very painful and tragic thing. So in a way, yes, we're talking about two different things. They can be distinguished and should be for practical purposes. The daily discipline, so that our practice becomes constant. But that does not produce awakening. It doesn't need to. It doesn't need to. Simply give yourself, John, to that moment-to-moment practice with humility, humbleness, sincerity, and honesty, as you have been doing. Simply continue like that.
But the more I do that, the more often there's a deep sadness that comes up.
Good. What do you do with it? Try to get out of it?
No, I stay with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's intense, and sometimes it goes, but it arises so often.
If it really arises from the depths of your being, let it come, John. Let it come all the way. See what it has to say. Let it in. Let it in. The only way that you can really come to see from inside that this too is not a thing, not a single thing, is to go all the way, and to embrace it all the way, bring it all the way in. That at the bottom of that deep sadness, John, is a great boundless joy, I can assure you. But if that sadness is in you, you have to open up and bring it out. Okay, all the way. When you're settled enough, you will see what is at the bottom of that sadness, John. When you get there, you laugh and send me a message, would you?
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Anybody else wants to ask a question before going to stretch?
May I ask a question? Yeah. So, you know, I don't know, there is like 3 levels doing artists, like, first level is the mountain is mountain and the water is water. The second level is you see the mountain is not the mountain, the water is not the water. And the third level is you see the mountain is the mountain again, and the water is the water again. Do you think there are some similarity with these three levels and or like meditation practicing? Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, it's a famous Chinese expression from a Chinese Zen monk. I believe this is about the only thing that we know from this Chinese monk. Not a lot is known about him, but he summed up the essentials of his practice that way. Before I practiced, mountains were mountains, rivers were rivers. I know who I am, I know what's. But then when I went away into the practice, mountains were not mountains, rivers were not rivers. Well, this is the point at where everything, the self-created world is starting to dissolve. You understand? The knowledge objective that we have about myself, about you, about the world, it starts to dissolve because it cannot hold up. It cannot sustain itself. It is not real. It is just our ideas, notions, comparisons. So this starts to become undone in a very good way. This is where the great doubt manifests. It sounds strange, but a mountain is not a mountain. More simply, I don't know what a mountain is anymore. I don't know what a river, I don't know what I am. I don't know what you are. It's not always a pleasant place to be, but that's not the end, of course. But it is very, in a sense, it is essential because it is letting go, becoming disentangled from all of our delusions. Then, as you point out, the third part on the surface sounds the same as the first. When I finally reach the place of true abode or abiding, he uses the same word, I believe. When I finally reach the place of true abode, in other words, when he realized it, in the Chinese, it's very nice because then you expect something really, really wonderful to come, right? The stars shone with a beauty. No, and then he just says, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. Or maybe better, mountains now are really the mountains that they are. Rivers are simply flowing freely, the rivers that they are. So on the surface, the first and the third part, the words are the same, but the content is completely different. Because in the first part, we are entangled, but we don't know it. Thus, we pursue the way. We get to a point where things are not clear. Yes, yes. But finally, when it turns over, so to speak, where are we? Oh, we become superhuman beings. We become who we truly are. And that is more than enough. Now we see the river in all of its beauty. So in a way, all of that monk's practice is summarized in that very simple statement, the 3 stages. It's very profound. But in terms of what I was speaking about today, we might very simply say in the 3rd stage, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers without entanglement. There's nothing to get entangled in there. There's no abiding. The river freely flows. As I would put it from my experience, the true beauty and dignity of each and everything is now manifest. Does that help?
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's really, really helpful. Thank you. Mind arises without abiding. Yeah, thank you.
It's saying the same thing. It's saying the same thing. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Juliana.
Yes, I would like to come back this point, dwell in no abiding mind. As I recalled in Diamond Sutra, this is an answer to a question: what is a Bodhisattva mind? And so, in a way, in our daily life, we practice generosities. A lot of people has the thought, I'm doing good things. But in this sutra, it says you have to dwell in no abiding mind, so you don't even think about you are doing good. And no discrimination or anything. Only with this kind of mind, without any intention of doing it, then that's the right practice.
Thank you. Yes, it's raised several times, this expression about not abiding. In a sense, it's the theme of the whole Diamond Sutra, but there are several times when it is raised. But you're right, in terms of what is true, the paramita of giving, of generosity, and to arouse that mind. Yes, do, by all means. But don't let that mind abide anywhere. How good I am, much better than the others. I gave more. This is a very gross, obvious example of where the generosity is not generous at all. The mind is still dwelling, abiding. Thank you for making it more concrete, Juliana.